Thanks for directing me to this. I had not gone through the exhibits because reading the letter, it was like, oh, it's just the same exhibit over and over again, which it is, right? Showing how many times it's been produced. But when I actually sat down and read it, this is kind of a big deal. I'm sort of fascinated that the Lively people wanted to tee this up for people to see. So there's a whole string of texts, and they're talking about a Hollywood Reporter article, I think, that's come out, and Sony's backing Blake and Colleen, and it's so there's this whole set of messages going back and forth in August, kind of the main part, like early to mid August of 2024, the sort of when the smear campaign is sort of alleged to have started. And they're going back and forth. I think Baldoni starts it with like a Hollywood Reporter article or something. It's all about how Sony's basically like, oh, we love Blake and we love Colleen and we're with them, basically. And he's like, this really sucks, talking to this group. I don't know whose phone this originates from, but I'm pretty sure it's not Jen Abel because her name is spelled wrong, and whoever's phone this is. Hold on. I just got home and it was so much quieter at my office than it is here. Okay, so they're having this whole conversation and they're trying to figure out, and Justin's clearly very disappointed about this really sucks that this is happening and I'm disappointed in Sony and blah, blah, blah. And I understand your comment of I feel bad for him because you guys care about this person. I don't care about this person. But I recognize your empathy. I also just I've seen and continue to see the most horrific shit that people do to each other. And so it's very, bad press on my scale of bad things people do to each other is not very high. But this is right in the midst of it, right? And Baldoni's like, I can't believe this is happening. And they sort of go back and forth. And then Jamie gets on here and sort of talks to the group as the CEO of Wayfair, as the chief executive, of I talked to him and here's where we are. And based on the story that Lively has been telling for almost 11 months now, about, and having documents to back it up, at least to some degree. This was the same time they're hiring Jed Wallace. They're planning scenarios. They're talking about what they're going to do on the internet. And then, of course, her allegation that they are engaged in a, Machiavellian conspiracy to make her look bad, blah, 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 blah. In the context of that story that we've been hearing for a long time, you would expect this message to be something like, Sony has come out in favor of Blake. This sucks. I can't believe she's doing this to us. We're going to have to get her. Remember, according to her, they have hired Wallace at this point. They are in the middle of a smear campaign where they have got all these bots and all these tools available to them where they can control the narrative to make her look as bad as possible. But that's not what he says. What he says is, yeah, it's not great, but you know what? This is something that we can't really control. This is Sony acting in its own interest. And if Sony wants to support her, then let Sony support her. Because there's nothing, what he's saying here where he says, let her be praised by Sony. It's not a bullet at us. Finally, it's an article that's not directed at Justin. What he's saying is the best case scenario is that we both look good. But just because she looks good, that doesn't hurt us. That doesn't make us look bad. And that's not what you would expect from somebody who's engaged in a smear campaign. And he then goes into just this general language talking about taking the high road and saying, hey, all I care about is that we put out our movie, that it's profitable. Let's not lose sight of the bigger picture, which is protecting Wayfair, our company. I guess Lively could try to hang on to that. But, this is not the message of a person who is directing a negative smear campaign against a former coworker that they're talking about here. It's just not. Sometimes when I see pieces of evidence, there's so much evidence that happens in cases, but every once in a while I see a piece of evidence and I'm like, that's opening or that's opening statement or closing argument shit there. And, you know, I've always felt like that video of Blake Lively on whatever that show was where she's like, oh, should I give him my phone number? You know, that whole thing about the domestic violence people. That if I were Wayfair, I would probably open my case with that. And then in Lively's case, obviously the things that she's got, that scenario planning document is probably what I would open with if I were her. But most stuff falls somewhere in between. But in terms of, like, it's not an evidentiary silver bullet, but in terms of, to believe that there was a smear campaign, you have to believe that these people were affirmatively out to get her, and also out to get her because they had sexually harassed her and she had held them accountable. You have to believe that that was their mindset. And this message completely undermines that idea. Not to mention where he says up there, who knows, maybe Blake and Ryan forced Sony to put something out, which maybe they did. Even if they did it of their own, I think he means of their own volition, on their own volition, who cares? The industry knows the truth. We know the truth. So the facts are going to come out. The truth is going to come out. It's on our side. We're fine. Those are not the words of somebody who is manipulating Beyonce's internet so that everybody will hate Blake Lively. Now, I know this is only one message, and I am not by any means, just as I never have before, said this document is the whole case. But this is really, really remarkable to me because I have seen argument after argument, document after document, signal messages and scenario planning and Jed Wallace allegations and all of that stuff for months and months and months, trying to connect the dots on how they were trying to ruin her. And this message to the same, by, between, and among the same people happening at the same time is the first thing I have seen that actively is actively inconsistent with that narrative. What we have seen so far is there are still holes that you're filling in the dots for, and the holes haven't been filled yet, right? Where's the stuff we're supposed to be waiting for that says, you know, hey, everybody, go out there and ask your 5 best friends to go vote on this, you know, like this Instagram post so that Blake gets fucked. We've been waiting for that. But this is the first time I can remember where I see something that the Wayfarer people wrote and created that actively disagrees with or contradicts the narrative that at this time in history, these people were sitting around twisting their mustaches trying to figure out how they could fuck her the hardest in the worst possible way. And I think that's something.